wheel chocks, get it lined up, getting the car off the ground. It's looking good. Just about right there. Jack stands. Lower the car. Oh, I forgot something, didn't I? So in a perfect world, I would have broke the lug nuts loose before I jacked up the car. Just like this. And look, it's a different car out of nowhere. But in this case, I was thinking my pneumatic wrench would be enough to break the lug nuts loose. But the problem is I bought Harbor Freight really cheap tools, so I wasn't able to get the lug nuts loose. So I've got the car jacked up, and I didn't want to bother getting it off the jacks. So I had to come up with some different ways. So probably the easiest way is to just use the brakes of the car to hold the rotor while you're trying to break it loose. So in this case, I'm using the parking brake on the rear wheels, and it worked pretty well. But if I'm working on the car for the brakes, that's not going to work. So what you could also do is use an impact wrench. So I got myself into this problem by thinking my impact wrench would work to begin with. But what I have here is an electric impact wrench, and it actually turns out this electric impact wrench has a lot more torque, and it actually worked out pretty well. So I'll put that link in the description for the tool that I ordered. So that's great and all, but you're saying to yourself, well, I'm not going to go out and buy an impact wrench just to get my lug nuts off, and that's fair. So what you could also do is use a 2 breaker bar setup here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my first breaker bar on the lug there, and I'm going to take a second breaker bar and I'm going to put it on the lug. And my plan here is I'm going to use the floor to brace my second breaker bar, and then I can use the first to break it loose. So I'm just going to start pushing on the breaker bar. You can see it rotates until it catches on the floor there. And what I'm going to do is, now that it's secure on the floor, I'm just going to gently give it pressure, just keep working up, and eventually it's going to break loose, just like that. So takes a bit of work using this method. It's not as easy as if the car were on the ground to begin with. And on this lug nut here, I have to use the wheel lock, which I really don't understand why people order these things as a factory option. I mean, in this case, it's a Porsche, so these wheels really only fit these cars because of the offset and the lug pattern and all of that. But realistically, I saw a car in the junkyard that had Honda Special Edition Civic wheels that had the lug nuts, and really it just made it harder to take those wheels off in the junkyard and recycle them, so kind of a waste of money, I say. So I got 4 of the lug nuts broken loose here, but this 5th lug nut is going to be a problem because all the other lug nuts are already loose, so they're not going to provide resistance. So my breaker bar is a little stuck in the ground here. Just break it free a little bit. So if you don't have 2 breaker bars, or if you're down to the last lug nut like this, what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to use the wheel itself to break the lug nut loose. So what I'm going to do is get my breaker bar on the lug nut there and rotate it around, and you usually have to think about which way is clockwise and counterclockwise, so I figured it out. And now I'm just going to use the wheel itself to try to get leverage to break that lug nut loose. It's a little bit more difficult because it's a smaller lever arm than the breaker bar, but if you try and just brace and work it a little bit, you can get it to break loose. So this last method is if you're really desperate. So the brakes don't work, you don't have an impact wrench, you don't have a second breaker bar, and your socket wrench or breaker bar isn't long enough to reach the floor. What you can do is just try to jam your foot underneath the tire and just grab a hold of the wheel, and with those two combined, you should be able to get enough leverage to break it loose. And there you have it. I was able to get all of my wheels off, get the work that I needed to do, and put the wheels back on and call it a day without having to get the car off of the jack stand so I could break the lug nuts loose. But it takes about half an hour to get the car up on all four jack stands, and I was feeling kind of lazy. I didn't want to take it off of the jack stands, so I just went with it, and it worked out. Thanks for watching, and catch you next time.